Hi guys, I thought I'd make a quick tips guide for players who maybe want a little bit of help with Sifu. Please note these are just tips, as beating the game and becoming good at it will come down to nothing more than the good old practice makes perfect. But in saying that, here are what I think 8 helpful tips to help you get going in Sifu. Number 8. Take your time. Now this may seem like an obvious one, but seriously, on your first few playthroughs, just have a little patience and take your time. Don't go into fights being overly aggressive, and don't just button mash on the controller, thinking this will help you defeat all of your foes, as this will only get you so far, and as you progress, this kind of playstyle will eventually end up being your downfall, especially when facing a boss. So take your time, focus on defending, dodging and avoiding enemy attacks as best you can, at least at first, as this will then help you learn the attack patterns of your enemies, which of course is important. This is even more relevant when taking on bosses for the first time. When you do fight back, at first start with simple 1-2 combinations, especially on more difficult opponents, until you see how the enemies react to your attacks. You will eventually get used to their attack patterns and start to spot their weaknesses, and when they are open to being attacked. This will then allow you to attack them in full force, without you being needlessly hit. This will be important in helping you progress. Number 7. Find some distance. Fighting a large group of enemies can end up with you being dead relatively quickly, especially if you become surrounded. Even the weakest of enemies become dangerous when there are a large number of them attacking you at any one time. So when you see this happening, move away to gain some space. Use the dodge button by pressing R2 on the controller. This will result in you jumping backwards, helping you to gain some distance. And don't be afraid to run away if needed, as this is a great way to get away from a large group of people. So if you find yourself overwhelmed and surrounded, hold down that R2 button and just run away to gain some distance and reset yourself. This won't be possible in all situations, but when you find yourself surrounded, it's a great way to gain some substantial distance and regain your composure, so don't be afraid to use it. Number 6. Prioritize your targets and use weapons. This tip is pretty straightforward, but try and prioritize enemies that have weapons first. Being hit with a bat, pipe, pole or sword etc. does a lot more damage than being hit with a fist. So if you can, try and take out those enemies with weapons first. In doing so, it will allow you to be able to use their weapons against them, so you can then give them a taste of their own medicine. So don't be afraid to use any and all weapons you see lying around. Simply throwing a weapon using the R1 button can be a highly effective way of stunning an enemy and getting in a number of attacks to do serious damage. But be careful though, as certain enemies can catch a thrown weapon. Number 5. Focus. Make use of your focus bar. Your focus bar is indicated by the blue bar in the bottom left hand corner of the screen, and it fills up over time whilst fighting opponents. When full, it allows you to use a focus ability. Pressing the L2 trigger activates your focus bar, which temporarily slows down time. It slows down time whether you have enough focus or not to pull off a move. So this can be used to your advantage. If you need a few moments to think or to quickly look around you to see what's happening, then use it. When the bar is full, it allows you to pull off a focus move. Think of it as getting an instant free hit on an enemy, which can result in the enemy being temporarily stunned or taken to the ground. You will gain more focus abilities as you progress and level up. This is super useful against individual enemies or when multiple enemies are around you. Use it on a single enemy to leave them open to a flurry of your attacks, or to use when facing multiple foes to take one enemy out of the action for a period of time, whilst you take on the rest of the bad guys around you. This is a great method to help buy you some time, so think of using it more like a mini stun when facing multiple enemies. Don't underestimate just how useful the focus ability actually is. Number 4. Grounded. This one is short and sweet. When fighting an opponent, you will either eventually at some point knock them to the ground, as well as being knocked to the ground yourself. If this happens to you, press the R2 button on the controller to quickly get up. When you knock an enemy down, move over to them and press and hold the circle button. This will then allow you to attack them whilst they are on the ground and do damage. Number 3. To parry or not to parry. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of parrying in Sifu, and it's really only truly effective on regular enemies. Parrying an attack in Sifu is a little harder to do than you might think. Probably because enemies can attack you quite quickly, as well as there being multiple enemies on screen at any one time. This means it can be hard to focus on pulling off a perfect parry. To parry an attack, you simply need to tap or press the L1 button on the controller right before the enemy hits you. It sounds easy to do, but it can be quite hard to master, and remember, not all attacks can be parried. For those that have played the game Sekiro and are used to the deflecting technique, the same principle can be applied here, by quickly tapping the L1 button right before an attack. This can help you pull off a parry, which can then leave your opponent open to attacks. To be honest though, this is something that only practice can improve, and you will get better at it the more you play. But don't worry if you're finding it tough, as in my opinion, parrying really is not the most essential ability in this game, and you can do completely fine without it. So practice it if you want to, but don't worry about it too much, as it's not that essential for completing the game. Number 2. Dodge. Your R2 button is your dodge ability, and it's a great tool for putting some distance between you and your foes, as well as moving out of the way of a particular ability that may otherwise hit you or require you to be a little bit more precise with either your blocking, parrying or avoiding abilities. Pressing R2 by itself will make you dodge backwards, but pressing R2 whilst holding the left thumbstick either to the left, right or forwards will also allow you to dodge in that direction. So if you're having trouble avoiding certain attacks, or blocking those pesky leg sweeps for example, then simply just dodge away from them. This ability is actually really effective in a lot of instances and proves more useful than you might think, so don't forget to use it. Number 1. Avoid. Avoiding is probably the most important ability in the game, at least in my opinion. Learn to avoid incoming attacks and you will be Bruce Leeing all of your enemies into the afterlife in no time at all. Whilst blocking by holding the L1 button, if you press up on the thumbstick, you will avoid all ground attacks. If you press down on the thumbstick, you will avoid all abilities aimed towards your head. This can and does feel quite cumbersome at first, as it does not feel natural. However, what the game doesn't tell you is that you can also avoid attacks by pressing left or right on the thumbsticks. This makes avoiding attacks so much easier to do, as moving the thumbsticks left and right whilst holding the L1 button, with the occasional up and down movement thrown in, feels a lot more fluid and natural. Try it out and you'll see what I mean. Start to master the art of avoiding as soon as possible, and when you do, those once troublesome enemies become a distant problem. Anyway guys, those were my top 8 tips for Sifu. I hope you're enjoying the game as much as I am, and if you have any other helpful tips, then please leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.